The 4 escort ships did not run. For 11 minutes, Kestrel's command post watched them hold position near the drifting wreckage of the bombardment platform, close enough that Voss allowed herself to hope they were simply too stunned to act. Then the tactical display lit with a new heading, and hope died as quickly as it had come. "They're not retreating," Reyes said. "They're converging on our firing origin point." Nanda Kumar's voice came through, ragged with exhaustion and the particular strain of having pushed a reactor 12% past its intended ceiling. "We can't fire again. Conduit 3 is flagged, Conduit 5 is a hairline failure away from a breach. We got one shot, Admiral. We used it." Vantha stepped closer to the display, its ridges pulsing in tight, rapid sequence of pattern Nanda Kumar had come to associate with genuine alarm. 4 escort vessels carry conventional kinetic and directed energy weapons, not shield-dependent systems like the platform you destroyed. Your resonance weapon will not work against them the same way. They know this now. They will not offer their shields as a weapon against themselves twice. Voss's jaw tightened. "Then we don't fight them with the array. Reyes, what do we have on the surface?" "Conventional assets, anything not scheduled for the disarmament inventory." "We've got the Nightfall wing out of Thule," Reyes said, already moving to the come. 6 interceptors, atmospheric and low orbit capable. They're not built to fight starships, but they're fast, and they're ours." "Scramble them," Voss said. "Not to engage, to make noise. I want those escort ships to believe Kestrel is defended by more than one exhausted reactor and a prayer." As Reyes relayed the order, Vantha turned to Voss with something in its expression that, for the first time since its arrival, resembled genuine uncertainty rather than calm diplomatic distance. "Admiral, I must tell you something before this goes further. The compliance verification protocol includes a failsafe I did not mention, because I did not believe it would become relevant so quickly." Voss's eyes narrowed. "Tell me now. If a Concord vessel is destroyed by a non-compliant species during a sanctioned enforcement action," Vantha said, "the failsafe authorizes immediate reporting to the full council, bypassing the local enforcement chain entirely. Every species in the Concord will know within hours that a bombardment platform was destroyed over Earth, not by rumor, by verified fleet telemetry." "Meaning the entire council learns what Kestrel can do," Nanda Kumar said quietly. "Meaning," Vantha said, "that humanity has just made itself the single most important intelligence question in Concord space. Some will call for immediate, overwhelming retaliation. Others, and I believe there are more of these than the council would admit, will begin asking why a species capable of this was ever slated for disarmament instead of alliance." Voss absorbed this in silence, watching the 4 remaining escorts hold their converging course toward Kestrel's exposed position. "Ambassador, I need a straight answer. Does what just happened make an actual war with the Concord more likely, or less?" Vantha did not answer immediately. When it did, its voice carried a weight that made even Reyes go still. "I do not know, Admiral. I only know that the answer will be decided in the next few hours, not by council debate, but by what those 4 ships choose to do when they reach this position, and by whether the rest of your world is ready for what comes after, regardless of which way this goes." On the display, the Nightfall wing lifted off from Thule into the pale Arctic sky, 6 small shapes climbing to meet 4 ships built for interstellar war, while beneath the ice, Kestrel's reactor cooled toward silence, its single shot spent, its fate now resting on 6 days that had somehow already run out. The bombardment platform crossed the threshold of lunar orbit at 0600 hours, its 4 escorts fanning into a defensive screen that had never once, in 40 years of Concord expansion, needed to defend against anything from the surface below. Voss stood at the tactical display, Reyes at her shoulder, Vantha silent and still beside them, its ridges pulsing in a slow, anxious rhythm that no longer needed translation. On the screen, a single icon blinked amber over Greenland Kestrel, the only weapon humanity had aimed at a target designed to survive weapons far worse. "Nanda Kumar," Voss said into the come. Range window in 60 seconds. Confirm firing solution. Solution locked, Nandakumar's voice came back, tight with strain. Targeting the platform's primary shield emitter array. If the resonance cascade works the way the math says it will, we hit their shields at the moment of maximum harmonic load. And if the math is wrong? Reyes asked, quiet enough that only Voss heard it. Nobody answered. There was no answer that helped. The seconds bled away. On the surface above Kestrel, snow began to lift in slow spirals as the reactor beneath drew power at a rate the ice sheet itself seemed to resist. The ground trembling faintly, imperceptibly, like something enormous drawing breath. Firing window open, Nandakumar said. 10 seconds. Voss watched the amber icon on the display, the 5 hulls closing, unaware. Arrogant in a way only species that had never lost could afford to be. Ambassador, she said, without looking away from the screen, if this works, you understand what you've just done. You've handed a weapon of unknown capability to a species your own council decided was too dangerous to arm. Vantha's reply was quiet, almost lost beneath the countdown. I understand, Admiral. I made my choice when I walked off that scout ship alone. I would rather stand beside a species capable of refusing extinction than serve a council content to manufacture it. 3, Nandakumar said. 2, 1, firing, she said, and beneath 3 kilometers of ice. Kestrel's reactor screamed past every rated limit as the resonance. Lattice discharged everything 12% capacity could deliver. A beam of coherent harmonic energy lancing upward through rock, through ice, through atmosphere, and into the black. For half a second, nothing happened. Then the bombardment platform's shields, drawn to maximum strength in anticipation of a surface bombardment run, seized the incoming resonance and amplified it exactly as their own. Design specifications guaranteed they would collapsing not outward, but inward. In a cascading failure that raced through the ship's containment architecture, faster than any crew could react, the explosion that followed was silent in the vacuum. But the tactical display did not need sound to convey what had happened. The largest of the 5 hulls, the ship that had ended the Koresh capital, folded in on itself in a bloom of white fire and came apart. The command post erupted in a stunned, disbelieving silence, broken only by Reyes's low, quiet exhale. Direct hit? Vantha's ridges flared bright violet, an expression Nandakumar would later learn was the closest thing its species had to genuine astonishment. That should not have been possible. 12% capacity should not have been sufficient to. It wasn't our weapon that destroyed that ship. Nandakumar's voice cut in over the cum. Breathless, half-laughing with the particular hysteria of someone who had just watched an impossible theory become fact. It was theirs. We just told their shields what to do to themselves. On the display, the 4 remaining escort vessels broke formation, scattering outward in a defensive pattern that had nothing to do with strategy and everything to do with panic. Voss allowed herself exactly 1 breath of relief before the next thought arrived, cold and immediate. Reyes, get me eyes on those escorts. If they run back to Concord space, every species in that council is about to learn exactly what humanity built underneath the ice. And if they don't run, Vantha said quietly, its bright ridges dimming back toward gray, then what remains of that fleet will not leave until Kestrel, and everyone inside it is gone. 3 kilometers of ice groaned under the strain of Kestrel's reactor pushed past every safety margin its designers had ever certified. Nandakumar stood at the heart of the facility, in a chamber none of the visiting brass had ever been shown, watching 12% capacity crawl toward 13 on a display that measured the difference in human lives. The null shield generator, wired into the facility's outer shell by a team that had slept a combined 4 hours in 2 days, hummed at a frequency that made teeth ache and instruments drift. Alvarez knelt beside a conduit junction, sweat cutting clean lines through the grime on his face, running a diagnostic that would either confirm the array's single shot was viable or confirm that Kestrel was about to become a very expensive hole in the ice. Talk to me. Tomas, Nandakumar said. Null shields holding, Alvarez said. Deep scan resistance at 94%. If their arrays sweep us in the next few hours, we read as bedrock. Nothing more. He glanced up, jaw tight. The array itself is a different story. We're pushing conduits rated for 0.4 capacity to 0.12. Something's going to melt before this is over. Then we make sure it melts after we fire. Not before, Nandakumar said. In the command post above. Voss watched the 5 Concord hulls resolve into individual signatures on the tactical display. 4 escort vessels flanking a 5th. Larger ship trailing an energy signature Vantha identified grimly as a planetary bombardment platform. That is the ship that ended the Karesh capital, Vantha said quietly, its ridges a dull, troubled gray. I recognize the signature from the reports I was never meant to read. Reyes, back from the surface and streaked with Arctic grime, studied the display over Voss's shoulder. 1 shot, 12% capacity against a bombardment platform with full escort. Even if the array works exactly as designed, what does it actually do to that ship? It's not designed to destroy it, Nandakumar's voice cut in over the comm tense with focus. The resonance lattice doesn't punch through armor. It disrupts shield harmonics at a molecular level, collapses the containment field of Starship's shields. Generate to survive its own weapons discharge. Hit a ship with an active shield hard enough and it doesn't just lose the shield. A pause, heavy with implication. Depending on what's stored behind that shield, it might lose considerably more. Voss absorbed that, understanding exactly what Nandakumar wasn't quite saying. A 12% capacity shot, aimed correctly, might not need to punch through anything. It might turn the bombardment platform's own defenses into the instrument of its destruction. Ambassador, Voss said, if this works and that platform survives in any capacity, what happens next? Vantha's ridges pulsed once sharp. Then the Council will know, beyond any doubt, that humanity possesses a weapon capable of threatening a Concord warship. There will be no more talk of 90 days or 6. There will only be the question of how quickly they can end this before others learn what you've built. And if it doesn't work? Reyes asked. Then Kestrel burns, Vantha said simply. And the rest of your world disarms exactly as scheduled, believing it never had a choice at all. Voss looked at the tactical display one last time. 5 hulls. 18 hours become 12 become 6. Closing the distance with the patient certainty of a species that had done this before and never once lost. Nandakumar, she said into the comm. When that platform comes within range, I want to know the second you're ready to fire. Because we are not getting a second attempt at this. 3 kilometers below her, in a chamber lit by the sick green glow of overtaxed conduits, Nandakumar closed her eyes for exactly 1 breath, and then opened them, already reaching for the firing control. Copy that, Admiral, she said. Let's find out what we built.
The contact resolved on Kestrel's tracking display as 5 distinct hulls, arranged in a loose formation just beyond the moon's orbit, decelerating on a course that would put them in near-Earth space within 18 hours, not 6 days. Vantha's ridges dimmed to a troubled gray when Reyes relayed the reading over the comm. That is not the verification fleet's scheduled approach vector, the ambassador said. They were not due to depart Concord space for another 5 days by my own briefing. Then either your briefing was wrong, Reyes said, or somebody wanted us to think we had more time than we do. Osei's team reached the scout ship's ramp, and under Vantha's guidance, 2 engineers began the delicate work of extracting the null shield generator from its housing, a device roughly the size of a shipping container, its surface a lattice of dark crystalline material that seemed to drink in the pale Arctic light rather than reflect it. Back in the command post, Voss watched the 5 inbound hulls with the particular stillness she reserved for decisions that could not be unmade. Ambassador, she said into the comm, if that's not the verification fleet, what is it? Vantha's answer came slower this time, threaded with something that translated imperfectly as unease. 5 hulls, that formation, that deceleration profile, that is not an inspection pattern, Admiral. That is a strike formation. If I'm reading this correctly, someone within the Council did not trust the survey either. Someone decided to remove the uncertainty entirely, rather than verify it. Nandakumar's head snapped up from her console. You're saying they're not here to check if we disarmed. You're saying they're here to make sure we can't refuse. I am saying, Vantha said, that if this is a preemptive strike formation, your 90-day deadline was never real. It was theater, to keep your world compliant and unprepared while the actual decision was already made. The command post fell into the particular silence of people recalculating everything they thought they understood. Voss felt the shape of the trap closing, not around Kestrel, not around any one facility, but around the entire planet. Reyes, she said, voice tight but level. Get that generator underground now. Nandakumar, I want the array's real timeline, not the optimistic one. What can we actually field in 18 hours? Nandakumar was already running the numbers, her fingers a blur across the console. 18 hours gets us maybe 12% capacity. Enough to test the resonance principle. Not enough to stop 5 warships. Then we don't stop them, Voss said. We make them not want to land. Vantha's translator caught something in her tone that made its ridges pulse with sudden, sharp attention. Admiral, what are you proposing? Voss's gaze moved to the tactical display, to the 5 hulls crawling closer across the black. You told us the Concord fears a species that might say no. Let's give them a reason to believe it. She turned to Nandakumar. 12% capacity. Can it hit one target? Just one? Nandakumar hesitated, the number resolving into a decision. One target. If we overload every conduit we have, then we're not defending Kestrel tonight, Voss said. We're sending a message. Above the Arctic ice, the scout ship's null shield generator was lowered into the tunnel entrance, disappearing into the dark toward the reactor core 3 kilometers below, while overhead, unseen and unknowing, 5 Concord warships continued their descent toward a planet that had just decided, for the first time in 40 years of silent observation, to stop pretending to be helpless. Part 5, 6 days narration, 6 days. Not 90. The number hit the command post like a depth charge, and Voss watched the room recalibrate around her in real time, engineers abandoning 14-month roadmaps, analysts tearing up assessments built on a timeline that no longer existed. 6 days doesn't get us a functional array, Nandakumar said, pacing the narrow strip of floor behind her console. 6 days barely gets us a partial lattice, maybe 40% capacity, if every fabrication line in Kestrel runs continuously and nothing breaks. Then nothing breaks, Voss said. Vantha, still seated at the conference table under guard, watched the exchange with quiet, unreadable attention. There's another problem, Admiral. The verification fleet's deep scan arrays do not merely detect fabrication. They map it. If your facility registers any active industrial signature during their pass, the survey data goes directly to Concord Command. There will be no opportunity to explain, no diplomatic channel to argue intent. The Council's response to a detected violation is immediate strike authorization. Reyes's expression hardened. So we can't build and hide at the same time. You cannot, Vantha agreed. Not with conventional shielding. Null shielding technology capable of blocking a deep scan array does not exist in your current inventory. But it exists in yours, Nandakumar said, catching the implication half a second before Voss did. Vantha's ridges pulsed, a gesture Nandakumar was beginning to recognize as something like a nod. Ordnate diplomatic vessels carry null shield generators as standard equipment to protect sensitive negotiation data from rival factions within the Concord itself. My scout ship, sitting on the surface above us, has one installed. Voss studied the ambassador for a long moment, weighing the offer against every instinct honed by a career spent distrusting first contact. You're offering to give us alien counter-surveillance technology to hide a weapon from your own government. I am offering evidence, Vantha corrected. If humanity survives what is coming, I want it known that not every voice in the Concord chose complicity. And if I am wrong about you, if this facility is nothing but desperation and false hope, then I will have lost nothing but a research vessel the Council never expected to see again. Was Nandakumar who broke the tension, already moving toward the door. I need that generator in Kestrel within the hour. Every hour past that is an hour the deep scan array might catch us mid-transfer. Voss nodded once, sharp. Reyes, escort the ambassador and the extraction team personally. Nobody touches that ship without you standing next to it. As Reyes and Osei's team moved out, guiding Vantha back through the ice tunnels toward the surface, Voss remained behind with Nandakumar, staring at the schematics now glowing openly on every display in the command post. "If this work," Voss said quietly, "we buy ourselves time to finish the array before anyone outside this room knows it exists." "And if it's a trap," Nandakumar said, "we've just handed the Concord a live demonstration of exactly how desperate we are, 6 days before their entire enforcement fleet arrives." Voss's eyes didn't leave the schematics. "Then we'd better make sure it isn't a trap." Above them, in the pale Arctic dawn, Reyes's team reached the concealed hatch just as a second signal lit up the tracking display. Not from the scout ship on the surface, but from deep space far beyond the orbit of the moon. A new contact, far larger than the scout, had just entered the system. The verification fleet was early. Image prompt: ultra-realistic cinematic science fiction photography, 16.9 widescreen. Arctic surface at pale dawn, snow and ice stretching to the horizon under a bruised violet-orange sky. A sleek silver Concord scout ship rests on the ice near a concealed maintenance shed hatch, its hull reflecting the low sun. Colonel Marcus Reyes, broad-shouldered, graying buzz cut, burn scar on left hand in dark tactical gear, leads a 6-person armored extraction team including Captain Dana Osei, dark coiled hair beneath a matte black helmet, scar on left forearm moving toward the ship's open ramp. Ambassador Ket-Sir Vantha, tall violet-skinned alien with glowing skull ridges, walks calmly beside them under guard. In the distant sky, a faint new light glimmers ominously among the stars. Photorealistic skin and fabric textures, realistic snow and ice detail, cool dawn lighting with warm horizon tones, sharp focus, high dynamic range, cinematic depth of field, premium feature film realism, no text, no watermark, no logos. Part 4. The Koresh Precedent. Narration. Nandakumar leaned forward, her reflection ghosting faintly across the reactor schematics she still hadn't managed to fully hide. "You said the Koresh disarmed exactly as asked. What happened to them wasn't punishment for refusal. It was something else." Vantha's dark eyes settled on her, unreadable. "The official record states the Koresh grew unstable after disarmament. Internal conflict. Resource collapse. A civil war that consumed their capital world within 4 years. The ridges along its skull pulsed slower now, almost mournful. I sat on the oversight committee for that transition. I read the reports before they were rewritten for public release." "Rewritten," Voss said flatly. "The Koresh did not collapse from within," Vantha said. "They were harvested. Their shipyards, their industry, their planetary resources, absorbed into conquered territories within 18 months of full disarmament, under the administration of a species called the Doraxi, who sat on the enforcement council that demanded compliance in the first place." A pause. "Disarmament was never about safety, Admiral. It was about opportunity. The Conquered does not fear species with weapons. It fears species that might one day use them to say no." Reyes's jaw tightened. "And Earth. Earth is worse," Vantha said. "In 40 years of observation, your species developed faster than any civilization in conquered history. Weapons, doctrine, adaptability. The Council does not see potential allies. It sees a resource too dangerous to leave armed and too valuable to leave alone." Its throat translator flattened the words, but the weight behind them was unmistakable. "You are not being disarmed for the Conquered's safety. You are being disarmed for your world's resources, and for the labor of 8 billion people who will have no weapons left to refuse with." The room absorbed this in silence. Nandakumar felt the schematics behind her glow like an accusation. "Why tell us this?" Voss said slowly. "Instead of your own council?" "Because my own council would kill me for saying it," Vantha said without drama, as though stating a simple fact of physics. "There are others who suspect. None who will speak. I came here alone at considerable risk because I wanted to see with my own eyes whether humanity's survival was even possible before I decided whether to help you attempt it." "And your conclusion?" Reyes asked. Vantha's gaze moved once more to the schematics, to the resonance lattice diagrams Nandakumar had failed to conceal in time. "You are still building something you should not have time to build. That tells me one of two things. Either your species is far more capable than the survey suggested, or far more desperate. Perhaps both." The ridges pulsed, brightening faintly. "I would like to help you find out which." Voss exchanged a glance with Reyes, then with Nanda Kumar. None of them spoke for a long moment. An alien ambassador, alone, unarmed, offering to betray the very council that held humanity's fate in its hands. It was either the opportunity of a lifetime or the most sophisticated trap any of them had ever walked into. Before we discuss help, Voss said finally, I need to know what the compliance verification actually involves. If your council sends ships to confirm disarmament, what exactly are they looking for? Vantha's answer came without hesitation, and it was worse than any of them expected. Not just visual inspection, Admiral. Deep scan arrays capable of detecting industrial-grade fabrication signatures through solid rock, through ice, through anything short of a null-shielded vault. The verification fleet does not simply look at what you show them, a final pulse of light along its ridges. It looks for what you are trying to hide, and it is arriving in 6 days, not 90. Part 3. First Contact Uninvited Narration. The Concord scout ship broke atmosphere over the North Atlantic at 0407 Greenland time. Its descent silent, its hull absorbing radar the way a shadow absorbs light. Colonel Reyes watched the tracking display from Kestrel's makeshift command post, 3 kilometers of ice between his boots and the surface, and felt the same cold certainty he'd carried through every deployment of his career. They know. The ship touched down 2 kilometers from the facility's concealed surface entrance, an unremarkable maintenance shed disguised as an old weather station. It did not announce itself. It did not request landing clearance. It simply arrived the way a predator arrives, testing whether anything moves. Voss authorized a response team before Reyes could ask. 6 operators from Kestrel's Internal Security Division, led by Captain Dana Osei, 29. Tightly coiled dark hair beneath a matte black tactical helmet, a jagged scar along her left forearm from a training incident with a prototype energy weapon moved out through the ice tunnels toward the surface hatch. What emerged from the Concord ship was not what anyone expected, not soldiers, not weapons. A single figure descended the ramp alone, humanoid in silhouette but wrong in every particular, nearly 7 feet tall, its skin a deep bruised violet, faintly luminescent along ridges that ran from its brow to the base of its skull. Its eyes were too large, too dark, entirely without visible pupils, and it moved with unsettling fluidity, joints bending in places human joints did not. It raised both hands empty, in a gesture that translated across species as clearly as any word. I am not here to fight. Osei's voice crackled through the comm to Kestrel Command. It's alone. No weapons visible. It's just standing there. Nanda Kumar, watching from the command post beside Voss, felt something cold settle behind her ribs. That's not a soldier. Look at the coloring. The luminescence pattern. That's a diplomatic caste marking. A diplomat, Reyes said. Alone. At an installation that isn't supposed to exist. The alien spoke. Its voice carried through a translator device embedded at its throat, thin and reedy compared to Thal's broadcast baritone. I am Ambassador Ketsur Vantha, of the Ordinate Concord delegation. I come with a message for whoever commands this place. Voss made the decision in seconds. She ordered Osei to escort the ambassador down, under guard but without hostility. Whatever Vantha knew, whatever the Concord suspected, a fight in the tunnels beneath Kestrel would end the program before it ever launched. Vantha was brought to a reinforced conference chamber deep within the facility. Seated across from Voss, Reyes, and Nanda Kumar, flanked by armed guards who did not lower their weapons. The ambassador's luminescent ridges pulsed faintly, a rhythm Nanda Kumar suspected was involuntary, something like a pulse, or breathing. You should not exist, Vantha said, addressing Nanda Kumar directly, its dark eyes fixed on the schematic still glowing faintly on a nearby monitor, before she could kill the display. This facility, this project, it was not in the survey. Then your survey was incomplete, Voss said. Our survey, Vantha said, was thorough. 40 years of observation. Every orbital platform, every naval yard, every research campus above ground and below 3 meters of shielding. A pause, the ridges pulsing faster. This is buried under 3 kilometers of solid ice, powered by a reactor design that matches no signature in our records. I did not come here as a threat, Admiral Voss. I came here because I am the only member of the Concord delegation who believes disarmament may be the wrong decision, and I needed to know if I was right. The room went silent. Reyes's hand drifted almost imperceptibly toward his sidearm. Voss held up a hand to stay him. "Why would you risk your life coming here alone, Ambassador?" Fanta's dark eyes moved slowly across the room, resting last on the reactor schematics. "Because the Koresh disarmed exactly as we asked. And the Koresh are gone. Something about that has always troubled me. I came to see whether humanity intended to make the same mistake." Its voice dropped, quieter. "I am relieved to see that you do not." 3 kilometers beneath the Greenland ice sheet, Site Kestrel hummed with a sound most of its engineers had never gotten used to. Not machinery. A resonance low and constant, like the world's largest heartbeat, radiating from the reactor core buried at the facility's heart. Dr. Priyanandakumar had spent 9 years underground for this project, and she still remembered every one of them written into the calluses on her hands. 34. Black hair pulled into a tight braid. A small burn mark on her left forearm from an early containment test. Wire-rimmed glasses that never quite stopped fogging in the humid tunnels. She was the lead architect of a weapons program so classified that fewer than 200 people on Earth knew its true purpose. The call from Colonel Reyes reached her at 300 local time. She listened without interrupting, then set the phone down and turned to her console, fingers already moving. "They don't know about the Aegis array," she said to her deputy. A wiry engineer named Thomas Alvarez, 29, perpetually unshaven, sleeves rolled to the elbow despite the cold. 90 days. That's not a deadline. That's an opportunity. The Aegis array was not a weapon in the traditional sense. It was a resonance-based defense lattice, designed over the previous decade in response to Earth's growing awareness that first contact, when it came, would not be gentle. Rather than matching alien firepower gun for gun, the array was built to exploit something the Concord's own intelligence reports had missed entirely. Humanity's willingness to build technology nobody else considered viable, because nobody else needed to. Where Concord starships relied on shielding technology refined over 1,000 years of interspecies conflict, human engineers had spent decades studying wave-based warfare with no aliens to fight, out of pure theoretical curiosity. Kestrel's scientists had taken those theories and built something that could turn a starship's own shields into a liability. But the array was incomplete. 14 months from operational readiness by the last full assessment. Now they had 90 days. Nandakumar pulled up the true schedule, the one she hadn't shown Voss yet, and felt her stomach tighten. 90 days wasn't enough to finish it. It might be enough to finish something. Alvarez leaned over her shoulder, reading the numbers. "You're thinking we scale it down. I'm thinking we scale it up," she said. "Every physicist we have. Every fabrication line. If the Concord's compliance ships are coming to verify disarmament, they're going to fly straight into a system that looks compliant. On the surface. Everywhere they think to look. And Kestrel isn't on their maps." "Kestrel isn't on anyone's maps," Nandakumar said. That was the entire point. Above them, across the ice sheet, satellite feeds showed the first Concord vessel already burning toward the inner system. A scout ship. Small, sleek, its silver hull unlike anything built by human hands. It was not scheduled to arrive for another 11 days. Earth's assumption of a grace period had already been quietly discarded. Nandakumar picked up the phone again, this time dialing Voss directly. "Admiral," she said, "I need everything Kestrel was promised for next year. I need it in the next 6 weeks. And I need you to buy me time we don't have." On the other end of the line, Voss was silent for a long moment. Then, "Tell me what you need. I'll find a way." Above the ice, unseen by either of them, the Concord scout ship adjusted its trajectory, not toward any capital, any base, any known defense installation. It was heading straight for Greenland. The signal arrived without warning, breaking through every frequency humanity had ever used. Screens across the planet flickered and went dark, then filled with a single image, a council chamber of impossible scale, ringed by delegates of a dozen alien species, their eyes, compound, slitted, glowing, all turned toward one small blue dot on a floating star chart. A being introduced itself as Speaker Vren Adasa Thol, first voice of the Galactic Concord, third of its clutch, silver-scaled skin catching the chamber's cold light. Its voice, translated into flat, emotionless English, delivered 11 words that would define the next decade of human history. Humanity will disarm completely, or humanity will cease to exist. In the underground command bunker beneath Colorado, Fleet Admiral Elena Voss stood frozen before the broadcast, her reflection ghosting over the screen, 38 years old. Dark hair cropped short for duty, a thin white scar along her jaw from a training accident a decade ago. She had spent her entire career preparing for first contact. Nothing had prepared her for an ultimatum. The Concord's reasoning was almost bureaucratic in its cruelty. Humanity, they explained, had been observed for 40 years. Drones, satellites, listening posts hidden in the asteroid belt. In that time, humans had shown talent for war exceeding every species in Concord history. Weapons evolved fast. Doctrine evolved faster. To the Concord, that was not strength. It was a pathogen. 17 species had voted. 17 species had agreed. Earth would surrender every warship, every railgun platform, every orbital defense grid within 90 days. Compliance ships were already inbound to verify. Voss's second in command, Colonel Marcus Reyes, broad-shouldered, buzz-cut going gray at the temples, a burn scar mapping the back of his left hand from the Pacific reactor fire 6 years prior, broke the silence first. 90 days to hand over everything that keeps 8 billion people alive, he said. And if we don't? The broadcast answered for him. The image shifted, showing a debris field where a moon had once orbited a distant, unnamed world. A species called the Koresh had refused a similar demand 11 years earlier. The Koresh no longer existed. Voss felt the room's temperature seem to drop. Around her, analysts, engineers, and junior officers stared at their monitors, waiting for orders that didn't exist yet. There was no protocol for this. No exercise had modeled surrender under threat of extinction. But Voss noticed something the room had missed in its panic. She rewound the footage frame by frame to the star chart behind Speaker Thal. Earth's position was marked in perfect detail: continents, orbital stations, even classified deep space arrays that shouldn't have appeared on any public chart. Except one thing was missing. An entire research station, buried 3 kilometers beneath the Greenland ice sheet, did not appear anywhere on the Concord's map. Whatever the Concord thought they knew about humanity's arsenal, it wasn't everything. Voss turned to Reyes, her voice quiet but steady. Get me a secure line to Site Kestrel. Tell them the ice is about to get very interesting. 90 days. The countdown had begun, and somewhere beneath a mile of frozen silence, humanity's real answer was still being built.
The 4 escort ships broke atmosphere in tight formation, and for 3 minutes, humanity's entire future narrowed to the space between 6 interceptors and 4 warships never designed to fear anything smaller than themselves. The Nightfall wing didn't fire first. Voss had given explicit orders: hold position, transmit on every open channel, make no aggressive move. Instead, the interceptors formed a loose perimeter around Kestrel's surface entrance and simply waited, running lights blazing, transponders broadcasting a single repeated signal that Vantha's translator rendered into 3 words: "We are watching." The escort commander, identified later, through channels Vantha alone had access to, as a mid-ranking Diraxi officer named Praxis Ol, held position for 11 agonizing minutes. Then, without explanation, without further hostility, all 4 ships altered course and began a slow, deliberate withdrawal toward the outer system. "They're running," Reyes said, disbelief cutting through his exhaustion. "They are not running," Vantha said quietly, its ridges settling into a steady, pale glow Nanda Kumar hadn't seen before. "They are reporting. Whatever data those escorts gathered on the platform's destruction, they will not risk losing it in a second engagement. The Council will want every detail of what happened here, not a second casualty to explain alongside the first." Voss allowed herself to breathe for what felt like the first time in 6 days. Around her, Kestrel's command post remained tensely silent, aware that withdrawal was not the same as peace, and that whatever came next would be shaped by a council of 17 species now forced to reckon with a question they had never expected to ask: what else was humanity hiding? 3 weeks later, in a chamber far grander than Kestrel's reinforced concrete, Vantha stood before the full Concord Council, not as a defector, but as the first voice to formally propose a motion no delegate had dared raise in living memory. Not disarmament, not destruction. A treaty of parity, negotiated rather than dictated, with a species that had proven, in a single act of desperate ingenuity, that it would not be harvested quietly. The vote was neither swift nor unanimous, but it passed. Back on Earth, Voss stood at Kestrel's surface entrance in the pale Arctic light, watching a diplomatic shuttle descend where a bombardment platform's debris had once burned. Rhea stood beside her, and Nanda-Kumar exhaustion etched into every line of her face. Joined them a moment later, Alvarez trailing behind with the particular gait of someone who had not slept properly in 3 weeks. "Parity," Rhea said, testing the word. "Not surrender. Not war. Not yet peace either," Voss said. "But a start." She glanced at Nanda-Kumar. "The array, what's next for it?"
Nanda-Kumar allowed herself, for the first time in weeks, something close to a smile. "Next, we build it properly. Not 12%. Not on borrowed time." She looked out at the ice, at the horizon where the shuttle continued its slow descent. "Next, we make sure nobody ever mistakes desperation for weakness again." Vantha emerged from the shuttle first, its ridges glowing a steady, warm violet under the Arctic sun, a color Nanda-Kumar had learned that meant something like hope. Admiral Voss, the ambassador, said, extending a hand in the human gesture it had learned during 3 weeks of council debate. The Concord would like to open formal negotiations, not as conquerors, not as judges. A pause, weighted with everything the last 6 days had cost. As equals, if humanity will have us. Voss took the offered hand, her grip steady, her scar catching the pale light. "Ambassador," she said, "let's find out what equals can build together." Above them, in the vast dark beyond Earth's atmosphere, 17 species watched and waited to see what humanity would become now that it had finally stopped hiding what it always was.